Welcome back, everybody. It's so good to see you. This is the fall 2019. We're just past the halfway point of the NFL season, and so for some of the teams like the Washington Redskins, it's really pretty safe to go ahead and look ahead to the next year, 2020, and start making plans for what those teams could do to their rosters looking ahead. So today, with that in mind, the Redskins being, I think, 1-8 at the moment right now, we're going to do one of my favorite things of all time, and that is to take an organization or a roster that's in really, really bad shape and try to make some recommendations on how to upgrade it and at least get it competitive, if not up to winning levels, over the next 2 to 3 seasons. So I really enjoy doing that. Today we're going to do that with the Washington Redskins offense. Keep in mind a couple of things. As the season goes on, some of the rookies are going to get more playing time. We'll get a better picture of how good they are. Injuries can always step up too, of course. This is just kind of what we're looking at. I don't expect too many things to change over the rest of the season. Right here it is. Let me give you a couple of explanations on what I'm doing right here. For those of you who haven't seen me before, these are the grades. So when you see a 3, a 4, a U, a 4, a U, those are the grades that I personally have assigned to the players. They can be way off. If you disagree with the grade, by all means, disagree with the grade. Let me know how badly I've screwed that up. For instance, Adrian Peterson right here, I've got him listed as a 3. For me, a grade 3 means a solid player, a guy who can hold down a starting position. While Adrian Peterson certainly can't do 500 or 600 snaps a season anymore, he's capable of being your lead back, at least this season, with other guys as part of the support group. A U would simply mean unknown or undecided. A lot of times we give that grade to a rookie who we just haven't seen enough snaps of. Sometimes we'll see it here in a minute, we give it to a veteran coming back off of an injury. We're not sure what he's going to look like coming back. So that's what the U is for. There are no 1s on this board, unfortunately, for the Redskins offense. But the number 1 would be an elite player. And I don't mean a very good player. I mean a truly elite, cream of the crop, undeniably all-pro good kind of a player. So that's a number 1. Number 2, I've got a couple of those here we'll get into. A number 2 grade would be a very good player. This is somebody who is not just a solid starter, not just somebody who's capable of holding down a starting spot. This is a very good player, but not an elite guy. And then grade 4, you'll see several 4s on here as well. A grade 4 would be somebody who is a contributor. Not capable of holding down a starting spot, in my opinion, but somebody who is a contributor here, like Trey Quinn, somebody who's contributing something to the football team. Also here, you'll see the numbers right here. These are the cap numbers for 2020. So if you see somebody right here like Harmon making $617,000, that's what his actual cap number will be for 2020. And in certain cases, you'll see the really bitty small print. We'll get to that too. That small fine print is what the dead cap hit would be. I didn't want to clutter up the board too much. Not everybody from the Redskins offense is on here this year. I just didn't have room for the board. Get a bigger board bin. Yeah, I'm thinking about it, along with better lighting and a microphone too. But for now, these are what I felt like were the top guys on the Redskins offense for this year. My number 1 advice, since the Redskins didn't bother to ask, or anybody from their fan base either, for Washington on how to get better for next year, is to go ahead and hire Mike Tomlin. That would be the quickest way to already get competitive and get better. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Pittsburgh wants to let him go. Of course, the Steelers wouldn't want to let him go. I don't think that that's actually going to transpire. But if you're Washington and you could get Mike Tomlin, my advice would be get him. If you've got to give up a couple of draft picks, do that. If you've got to pay him a boatload of money, do that. If you've got to give him more power and authority over the decision-making and the general manager side of things, do that. I would do whatever I could to get Mike Tomlin on board. I don't think that's going to happen, but it could. I know we've heard rumors about that a few weeks ago, a few months ago, when Gruden got let go. So I would do whatever I could to get Mike Tomlin on board. I would try everything I could to do that. If not, then there's certainly other guys out there capable. Listen, if Tomlin were to become available tomorrow, which he won't, but if he were to become available tomorrow, he'd have 6 or 8 or 10 NFL teams knocking on his door trying to get him to come and coach their team. So if you're Washington, you want to be one of those teams that is at least talked about for Mike Tomlin coming to you. On the flip side, if I were the friend of Mike Tomlin, I would tell Mike Tomlin not to go anywhere near Washington. I think the franchise has just struggled too much over the years, and I think some of those struggles go higher up than even the head coach or the general manager levels, because the losing or the non-competitiveness has been that bad for that long. So that's my opinion there on that. Let's get to the players. For 2020, I'm going to start with the quarterbacks and the wide receivers, because I know for a lot of you that's really where a lot of the interest is. And then for those of you who want to watch the full-length video and get into all the deeper stuff, we'll start hitting more of my favorite parts, which is the offensive line. Let's talk quarterback first. Alex Smith. Alex Smith, of course, had the horrible, gruesome injury, hasn't played at all this season. We don't even know if he's ever going to play again. We do know that he is back on a football field and that he is at least throwing the ball a little bit. We don't know if he's ever going to play again. My opinion is this, based on his age, number of seasons he's played, and how many injuries he's actually, or how horrific the injury was that he's already gone through, I'm going to go ahead and just cut him flat out. I said, Ben, where's your heart at? Where's your emotional support for a guy with a gruesome injury? It's right here in the $42 million we're going to pay him over the next 2 seasons. That's 2020 and 2021. Now, his cap number for 2020 happens to be $20 million. Pretty stout, not for what quarterbacks are making these days, but still, for his production level, it's a pretty stout number, $20 million. On top of that, you've got the next season, which is already guaranteed as well. By the time you add in the bonuses and everything, he's got a $42 million cap hit. My opinion would be, viewing his age and the injury, I don't think even if he were to come back, I don't think he's going to have a whole lot to offer. I don't think he would even be up to average in the NFL. I could be wrong. We're wrong all the time. That's what I think you would expect from Alex Smith. With that in mind, with me of the opinion that I don't think he's going to come back at full strength, and I don't think he's going to come back and be the player he was before. Not that he was an elite guy before, I just don't think there's a lot of hope there for him coming back to be a really, really good football player. I'm going to go ahead and cut him as soon as the season ends for this reason. I do not want his salary cap number affecting 2021. I'm okay with realizing that 2020 is probably going to be a hit in the reset button a little bit. I know we can compete. I don't think we can necessarily probably win in 2020, no matter who's coaching our football team. I think there's too many holes on the roster. I do think we can start to build the roster back up a little bit and compete in 2020, but I do not want $20 million of Alex Smith's cap number hitting me in 2021. So my opinion is you go ahead and cut Alex Smith right now as soon as the season ends, and you eat that whole $42 million of dead cap space in 2020, because generally speaking, I think 2020 is already going to be a bit of a struggle anyway. It's not that you can't win some games. It's not that you can't really start to compete, even if Mike Tomlin were to come in or whoever comes in. I just think that 2020 is going to be a struggle. That, combined with the idea that I don't think Alex Smith is going to come back and be a surefire starter quarterback anyway, I think the smart money there is just go ahead and let him go. Let all of that $42 million cap space hit on 2020, and that way when 2021 rolls around, you're totally free of that. Dwayne Haskins, I've got him as an unknown. We just haven't seen enough of him. I would like to see him get a few more snaps, not just unleash him to the dogs as the season rolls on, but I would love to see Haskins get a few more snaps this year. Keep in as much blocking, as much support as you can. Let him hand the ball off some. Let him throw the short passes. Let him take a couple of deep shots. I don't want him to just be unleashed to the dogs behind a bad offensive line and really just get waylaid this year. But I do need to see him get more snaps this year. We haven't seen hardly anything. What we have seen just hasn't been enough. So I've got him as an unknown. He's $3.3 million on the cap next year. Pretty easy on the cap next season. Right here you've got 2 guys, Colt McCoy and Case Keenum. They're very similar in their production levels. Neither guy, I don't think, is really destined to be a starter in this league. Certainly not Colt McCoy. He's been a journeyman for a long time. I really don't feel comfortable with putting Case Keenum in as my starter either. I just wouldn't want that. I know they had one good season back there a couple of seasons ago. I don't feel comfortable with either of these guys being my starter. That being said, I love one of these guys being my backup or my third string, depending on who else I have coming back. So they're both going to be free agents next year. Their production levels are both the same. I'm bringing back one of the guys, but not both of them. Probably for $3 million, you can get one of them back next season. That's a very good backup in the NFL. That's just somebody you need, somebody who's got some experience, somebody who's not afraid to get out there and throw the ball a little bit. And I think he's one of those guys. I know Colt McCoy has a very good background, got a very good attitude, very good work ethic. I assume the same about Case Keenum, but I don't actually know that. So I would be in favor of bringing back Colt McCoy at $3.5 million, but not Case Keenum. Either one of them, though, but certainly not both of them, would be the plan for next year. So that's the quarterbacks. I would also, and I don't know which draft pick I would use it on. I would also draft another quarterback next year, not because I'm sure that Haskins isn't the guy. I don't know that he's not, just because I haven't seen enough out of Haskins to really be happy with it. Besides that, it's never a bad idea, and a lot of NFL teams are not doing this. It's never a bad idea to have two young quarterbacks on the roster, developing both of them. Maybe they both pan out and you trade one away for a lot of other draft picks. Maybe neither one pans out, but it gives you a shot at developing somebody there at that quarterback spot. So I would definitely be drafting somebody next year. Maybe not in the first round, depending on how high my first round pick is and which quarterbacks show up in the draft next season. But I'm definitely going to be drafting somebody else there at quarterback. Let's move to the wide receivers. For a lot of you, I know this is very interesting too. This is your best deal, your best value on the entire football team. Terry McLaurin. He looks like the real deal. You never know. Sometimes people have a breakout rookie season, and that's as good as they ever get. But he looks like the real deal. He looks like, and I've graded him a number 2. Granted, it's only been 8 or 9 games. Okay, we got a lot more of football to see out of him. But he looks like the real deal. With quarterbacks like that on the roster this year, and with an offensive line like this, which we're going to get into in a minute, and with as little other support as he's had, and with the firing of head coach, when your rookie wide receiver can still look as good as he's looked this year, you have to really feel good about him looking that good going forward for the next 3 seasons of his contract. So this is his rookie season. You got him for 4 seasons. Next year you have him for $932,000. He isn't even costing you $1 million against the cap. This is your best deal of your entire football team, offense or defense. He looks legit, and you have a fantastic deal on him for at least the next 3 seasons. And depending on how things fall out, maybe you could even franchise him for a year after that. So that's Terry McLaurin. He can be your anchor. It looks like he can be your number 1 wide receiver, really hold down that wide receiving unit. It really makes you feel a whole lot better about the rest of your wide receiver core when you know you've got that guy starting right there at the top. So he appears so far to be legit. Paul Richardson here. Paul Richardson I've graded as a 3. I would not feel good, I do not feel good about him being the 2nd best wide receiver on the team. I would feel a whole lot better if he was the 3rd or 4th best wide receiver on the team. But needless to say, he can contribute. He offers deep speed. He's a decent wide receiver. I feel very good about him being on the football team. What I don't feel good about is this right here. $8.5 million cap hit. That's a lot for a guy who's producing what Paul Richardson is producing. I'm glad to have him on the team. I'm not glad to be paying him $8.5 million next season. Unfortunately, there's not a lot I can do about it because his dead cap hit, which is in the little bitty fine print, is $6 million, which means if I release him, I've still got to pay him $6 million. And so if I've got to pay him $8.5 million to be on the team or $6 million to not be on the team, I'd much rather just go ahead and have him on the team next year. And then I'm going to release him in 2021 because I think he's making something like $9.5, $10 million in 21, and the dead cap hit is only about $1 million, $1.5 million. So really, even though I like him on the team, I would rather him be my 3rd or 4th best receiver instead of my 2nd best receiver, which you could argue that he is right now. And even though I don't want to pay him $8.5 million, I'm going to keep him because I don't want to pay $6 million in cap space and only save $2.5 million. So that one's kind of an easy one for me. Trey Quinn right here and Kelvin Harmon. Trey Quinn is a contributor. I don't like him being the 3rd best wide receiver on the team. If he was number 4 or 5 in the depth chart, I'd feel a whole lot better about that. When you look at the wide receiver core, I've got McLaurin, who I feel great about, Richardson, who I'm solid on, Trey Quinn, and then Kelvin Harmon, who we just haven't seen enough out of at all. I know for a fact I need another wide receiver. Doesn't have to be a star. I don't have to go out in the free agent market and pay $15 million for somebody. I don't even necessarily have to go out and spend my 1st round draft pick on getting another wide receiver, but I know I need somebody. It can be a slot guy who I'm paying $6 million a season to, just to kind of open up some venues. I can even dip over into the tight end circle and try to get somebody for $6 or $8 million a season, or I can use my 2nd or 3rd round draft pick on trying to get another guy to catch the football here. Maybe in the tight end area, maybe in the wide receiver area. I love McLaren. I don't feel good about the depth after that. We'll keep Richardson because we have to. Trey Quinn, the money's right though, $587,000, so I'm definitely keeping him. And then Kelvin Harmon, $617,000. Haven't seen enough of him, but there's no reason, of course, to let him go yet. So basically, you're going to end up, the smart money is keep all 4 of these wide receivers and add one guy. You'd like to add somebody either out of the 2nd round of the draft, the 3rd round of the draft, or maybe a slot receiver out of free agency, one of the mid-tier or lower-tier kind of guys, just to kind of open up and give whoever ends up playing quarterback a couple of more, another guy to pass to. So those are the quarterbacks. Those are the wide receivers. Moving to the tight ends. Got Jeremy Sprinkle, Vernon Davis, and Jordan Reed. Jordan Reed, let's start with him. This is the interesting part. I've graded him a 3, which means that a healthy Jordan Reed, I think, can be a very solid tight end in the NFL. Not an upper tier guy. He's not one of the top 10 guys in the NFL, I don't think. But if he can come back healthy, I think he can be a solid option for you at tight end. I don't feel great about him being my starting tight end, but I also don't feel like that's a major hole either if he comes back healthy. The problem with Jordan Reed is that he is coming off of a big injury, and he's going to be making $10.3 million next season. Combine that with my little fine print here, his dead cap hit is $1.8 million. In other words, if I decide that I'm not thrilled about a healthy Jordan Reed being my starting tight end anyway, combine that with the fact that he's coming off a pretty big injury, combine that with the fact that I could save $8.5 million next season by cutting him, by releasing him, or maybe even, who knows, by trading him and picking up a 5th or 6th round draft pick. I'm pretty tempted to let Jordan Reed go. It's not that I don't want him on the team. I think he has value. I'm sure that he's still young enough to come back off of that injury and compete for a spot on my team. But man, that $8.5 million in cap space that I could save is awful tempting, especially if I assume that I'm going to be eating $42 million on Alex Smith this year. So I'm awful tempted, if thinking this through right here, to let Jordan Reed go. Now listen, if Jordan Reed hadn't been coming off the injury, if he looked like an all-pro before that, I'd be more than happy to give him the $10 million a season. I just don't think it's good money. I think the money is better spent in other places. So what I would personally do, and I totally understand anybody not wanting to do this, I would be letting Jordan Reed go as well. I would be cutting him. Does it leave me with a hole at tight end? Sure it does, but even if Jordan Reed's back on the team, I'm not sure that I've got a great tight end group anyway. So I've got Jeremy Sprinkle here. He's only $714,000. Of course, I'm bringing him back. Do I want Sprinkle as my starter? No. Do I want him as my backup? Yes, absolutely. Got him graded as a 4. Vernon Davis, been in the league a long time. I paid him $6.2 million last season. That didn't work out very well. I paid him more money in the 2 years previous to that. This is a free agent deal that just never did work out. This was not a deal that worked out at all for Washington. I'm going to be letting him go. He's a free agent anyway. So I'm going to lose 2 tight ends here on my decision base. I've got Jeremy Sprinkle coming back. So what I think when I look at wide receivers and tight ends is I need to get another tight end, a starting tight end somehow, and I need to get another wide receiver. Could be a slot guy. Doesn't have to be a top tier wide receiver, but I need a couple more guys that I can throw the ball to, and especially I need that starting tight end. I'm not going to fill all these holes in one off season. I know that. I'm going to start working on it. I'm going to start trying to bring in players at the right prices and try to upgrade the team that way. Wide receiver, tight end. Let's move to the running back spot. I've got Adrian Peterson here. Mentioned him earlier. Got him graded as a 3. He's still capable of holding down a starting spot in the NFL. Now, he can't be Le'Veon Bell. Le'Veon Bell's been getting 400, 500 touches a season. I've lost track. It's ridiculous. Adrian Peterson can't do that anymore, but he's still very solid. He blocks, he runs, he catches the ball. He's doing everything very well. He's one of not the better backs in the NFL, but he's one of the solid backs in the NFL. And so as long as I think that he's coming back healthy and he hasn't fallen off the cliff due to age next season, I want Adrian Peterson back very much. At $3 million, it's very low cost. If at any point I change my mind and I decide Adrian Peterson has lost 2 or 3 steps during this offseason, For only $750,000 in dead cap space, I can release him. So there's absolutely no point in releasing Adrian Peterson until I'm convinced that he can't play anymore. And I'm certainly not convinced of that based on what I've seen this season. As a matter of fact, he's looked very good in what has been a very tough quarterback situation, bad offensive line situation, firing the coach situation. He's actually looked very solid. So we're going to keep Adrian Peterson. Chris Thompson is going to be a free agent. If you want to bring him back, that's fine. It wouldn't cost much. He's a contributor, but I'm not worried about that. I'm probably not going to bring Thompson back. Darius Geis, rookie. We haven't seen anything out of him yet. We just haven't seen enough at all. But he only costs $1.2 million. You've got a high pick invested in him. Of course, he's coming back. I would love, over the second half of 2019, to see Darius Geis get some more playing time. It's not that I need necessarily to see what he can do, but I want to give him a chance to grow. I want to give him a chance to grow and develop on the playing field, and it's going to be very difficult for him to do that on the bench. So I want him to get more playing time. Matter of fact, I'll probably sit Adrian Peterson a good bit more, just so I can save his legs a little bit, hopefully not get him injured for 2020. Wendell Smallwood, going to be a free agent also. Doesn't hurt to bring him back. You can probably get him back for very little money, in the hundreds of thousands. Not worried about it either way. I'm probably not going to worry about that. For now, we'll assume he's not coming back. Bryce Love, same thing. You got a 5th-round draft pick invested in him, combined with, I think he's got an injury, so we just haven't seen anything out of him. $774,000. Very easy on the cap. You can't do any better than that. Still have somebody that you drafted. So Peterson, Geis, Love, all coming back next year. I'm not thrilled with that as my backfield. It's also not a backfield that I think is a really, really weak spot. I would probably pull somebody else in to that running back competition, whether it's a 3rd or 4th round draft pick, or whether it turns out to be somebody pulling off a free agency, somebody who I think is a veteran and who knows how to be tough, knows how to block, knows how to run tough. You know, not going to bring in a lot of talent at those prices, but somebody that can come in, at least compete and push these guys a little bit. I think you're fine at the running back spot for next season. Let's look at the offensive line, and we got a lot to look at here, and I love looking at the offensive lines. So we got so much to look at here. Let's start with Trent Williams, because I know some of you, this might be the last thing in the video you're hanging on to before you check out. Trent Williams, we have so much to talk about here with him. I am not going to try to weigh in on who's right or wrong in the original Trent Williams versus the Redskins fuss and argument and dispute. I don't know the details. I don't think hardly anybody does. I don't even know if other than Trent Williams himself and maybe Washington's upper management actually know the details of who said what and who did what and when it all transpired. So I'm not trying to weigh in on that and paint Washington as the bad guy or Trent as the bad guy. That's not the point. But for next season, what do you do with Trent Williams? And to me, where I come out on this is Washington should have already got him off the roster. Why they kept him on the roster is up to them. Respect their decision to do so. It makes no sense. At whatever point that they figured out that Trent Williams, for an extended period of time, it wasn't just a bad day for Trent, it wasn't just an emotional week, but Trent Williams had kind of dug his trench and said, I am not coming back to Washington. I don't want to play for this franchise. At that point, you have to start entertaining trade offers for Trent Williams. It's not a personal decision. It's just a business decision if you're Washington. And there's no reason for him to still be on this roster. There's every reason for Washington to have already traded him, to have already sent him away, to have already let him go to another team. He could be playing right now, this week, for some other team. They could have some draft picks or a draft pick, depending on what they could get for him. I don't think they could have gotten a lot for him due to his age and due to the dispute itself that often kind of turns some teams off, but they could have gotten something for him. They could have traded him away, and there was no reason not to do that. So to me, it's already been, no matter who was right in the original dispute, it's already been a bad business decision for Washington to keep him. The idea, and I need to tackle this head on, the idea that somehow you're setting a bad precedent, that by trading Trent Williams, now other players on the roster can demand their way out of Washington is preposterous. If a guy wants to go, if a guy wants to leave your team, let him go. All right, there's just no reason to keep him. If that means that, excuse me, I'm going to advertise for Dr. Pepper a little bit. If that means that your franchise is so pathetic that it opens up a floodgate that 10 more players want to leave your team, then that's a sign not that the players are wrong, but that your franchise is wrong. If, on the other hand, Trent Williams is the only guy who wants to go and everybody else is perfectly happy with staying, then you start to think, okay, maybe Trent was the problem and maybe we were right. In either case, the thing to do is let him go, trade him away. And it's been awfully, I don't want to rake out too many name calling words here, it's been awfully disappointing to watch Trent Williams continue to have to sit at home and to watch the Washington Redskins continue to have to deal with this in the media. They could already be past this. They could already have their draft picks. Trent Williams could have already moved on with life. It's just a business decision is all it should have been. So that's the end of that. I've graded him a 2 for now. There's really no way to know what Trent Williams is going to look like when he does step back on the field, whenever that is. I figure he's not going to be the Trent Williams he was before. Matter of fact, when we saw him play in 2019, we already saw him kind of start to tilt downward in terms of play based on the dominant Trent Williams we've seen in years past. So I don't think that we're ever going to see that dominant Trent Williams that we saw. The question that remains is, can he at least be the guy who holds down a starting spot? And I would suspect that he could be, as long as he's not more prone to injury because he's sat out some time and because of his high age bracket for a player. Even so, I don't want to pay him $14.5 million. I just don't want to pay that to an older player who already looked like they were starting to kind of go downhill a little bit in 2018. Now it's 2019. Now he's already sat at home for a while. It's going to be 2020, or at the earliest, before he steps on the field again. If I'm Washington, I do not want to pay $14.5 million to that player. It only cost me $2 million to cut him. I'm not going to cut him because he has trade value, so I'm definitely going to trade him. I should have already traded him, but I didn't. So as soon as the league year opens, I'm going to be entertaining any and all offers, and I'm going to be taking Trent Williams away, and we've traded him to some other team. All right, and that's just a business decision. That's not to say that Washington's the bad guy here. It's not to say that Trent Williams is the bad guy here. Maybe there's plenty of blame to go around. Who knows? But Washington made a bad decision to not have already traded him away. Continuing on with the tackle spot, we got Morgan Moses here. Morgan Moses is not a guy that I feel great about starting, but he can start. He's a halfway decent, somewhat solid, and I graded him at a 3. If he continues to be that, then I'm okay with keeping him. He's making $8.7 million next season, which isn't bad for a starter guy, as long as he can continue to play at that level. If for whatever reason he drops below his normal level of play, and he's not playing like that, he's playing like a backup, and he's playing like a guy who shouldn't even be starting in the league, and if I can anticipate that, then I'm going to let him go in a heartbeat, because even though it's $8.7 million to keep him, it only cost me $3.8 million to let him go. So I can save almost $5 million, almost $5 million, by just cutting him altogether. Okay, so I'm inclined to trade him away, but because of the other decisions I'm going to make on the offensive line, not trade him away, I'm inclined on cutting him. Because of the other decisions I'm going to make here on the offensive line, I'm going to keep Morgan Moses for next season and probably release him in 2021. I think is the sound move. He's never been great. Some years he's even struggled. He has looked decent lately over the past couple of seasons. Good enough there to be a starter. Definitely don't want him being my best player on the offensive line, but I definitely want him on the team, I think, for next season. Donald Penn only cost you $1.5 million last season, $1.5 million. So that's easy on the cap. There's a chance, and I haven't heard this in the media, I had no inside, but you look at how long Penn has been in the league, maybe he even thinks about retirement at this age. I would assume that since he's played this long as an NFL team wants him, he looks like the kind of guy who would keep on playing. So if I can get Donald Penn back at $1 million, $1.5 million, man, I'd love to keep him right there at that $1 million, $1.2 million mark. If I can get him back at that, I'll probably bring him back. He's a free agent, so that's a decision I have to make based on free agency. Not going to hurt you either way. I've got him graded as a 4. He's not going to be probably anything more than a backup, but I'd like to have a veteran backup if I can get him at $1.5 million for next season, assuming he's not thinking about retiring. Guards, Brandon Scherff. Now right here, I think even if all of you have agreed with me so far, and I know you haven't, most of you have probably found something that you think I'm an idiot on so far. But even if all of you have agreed with me so far, right here, Brandon Scherff is the place where probably 80 to 90% of all NFL general managers and all NFL pro personnel people will disagree with me on is this. Most of them would be in favor of keeping Brandon Scherff. As a matter of fact, wouldn't just be in favor of it, they would think, why would you not want to keep Brandon Scherff? And very few general managers, a couple, would be in favor of trading Brandon Scherff or of outright releasing him. And here's why. Brandon Scherff, I've got him listed as a number 2. You could even argue that he's a number 1, that he's not just a very good player, he's an elite player. I personally grade him as a very, very good player, not quite to that elite level. We could argue about that all day. A 1 or a 2, certainly. This is a heck of a football player. He's really good. And any NFL team would want to have him. Any NFL team would drool over having Brandon Scherff be one of their guards for their team. The problem is that he's going to be a free agent. And my choice is I can either franchise him, and maybe they did that last year. I haven't looked it up, but maybe they already did that. My choice is, no matter whether I can franchise him or whether I've got to pay him free agency money, he's going to be somewhere in the ballpark of $13, $14, $15 million a season. And that's a lot of money. $13 to $15 million a season. Possibly more if enough teams get the bidding on him. I'd love to be his agent because they're going to be making a good commission off of that. He's going to be making a lot of money. And I don't want to criticize Brandon Scherff as a player. As a player, you are worth whatever you can get on the market. If I were his agent, I would tell him to not re-sign with the Redskins. I would tell him in a heartbeat to get out there, get on the free agent market. This will be his one chance to sign a real deal for top money. 4 or 5 seasons from now, he won't be as young. He'll still be able to make some money, but it won't be this kind of money. This is his one chance to make a boatload of money because he is one of the best guards in football. And whether you designate him as elite or just very, very good, he's a player any team would love to have. Because of that, on the free agent market, he's going to make a lot of money. And even if he just comes back and re-signs with Washington, they're not going to sign for anything less than, I would think, $12 million a season. And the problem with that is, and some people say, well, you don't pay guards anything. I think that comes and goes. Any offensive lineman, you've got to have 5 starters. You've got to have 5 starters, and any offensive lineman that you pay a boatload of money to is going to be sucking money away from the rest of the guys on the offensive line. Not just that. You've got to come up as an NFL team, you've got to come up with about 30 quality NFL players. And so when you start to think about giving $12 to $15 million a season, maybe even $16 million a season to one player, just one player, who's on the offensive line, you really start to ask this question, how much is too much? At what point am I starting to hurt myself, hurt my chances of winning a Super Bowl? And I think at $12 to $15 million, Washington or any team would be hurting their chances of winning a Super Bowl by signing one player, one offensive lineman, particularly one guard, to that kind of money. So I'm not interested personally, even though I love Brandon Scherff, the player, love to have him on my offensive line. Based on the rest of the offensive line, I sure as heck need him. I'm just not interested in giving that kind of cap space to one player, particularly one offensive lineman, particularly one guard. So I'm going to, if I can, and I haven't checked this out, I apologize, I don't know about the franchise thing. If they haven't franchised them already, which I don't think they have, I'm going to franchise them and then I'm going to trade them away. Just like I think Kansas City did with D Ford last offseason. I don't know how much I can get for him, but I'm going to trade him away, get what I can. I am not interested in devoting that kind of cap space to Brandon Scherff. And it's not that I have any disregard for him as a player. I am all for him getting every dollar he can get, but if I'm part of upper management in Washington, I'm all for me getting as close to the Super Bowl as I can, and I think I can take that cap money and disperse it and get a better chance of going to the Super Bowl than I can by giving Brandon Scherff that amount of money. So that's the way that I would approach that. And by the way, most of you are going to disagree with me on that, and that's fine. You are in the majority. Most NFL general managers will disagree with me on that. And this is the great trap. Some of them get a good player and they think, of course I've got to re-sign him. Why would I not re-sign him? My owner is going to look at me like an idiot for not re-signing him. My fan base is going to look at me like a moron for not re-signing him. How could I possibly let him go? But this is where the smart money is. This is where the good teams are winning and making up better ground. This is one of the ways is by letting go somebody like this who's going to command a big cap space. So that's Brandon Scherff. Eric Flowers, he's going to be a free agent. I know if you're a Giants fan and you had to put up Eric Flowers, you're really disappointed and you're trying to dump on him. And if you're a Washington fan and you look at Eric Flowers and you're like, well, does it even matter if he's on the team or not? I would love to have Eric Flowers on the team. Not because I want him to be a starter. I don't. I've got him graded as a guy who really shouldn't be a starter in the NFL. But I'd love to have him as my number 6 guy. This guy coming off the bench, this guy who has a lot of experience, who at least had enough athleticism to be a first-round draft pick. Even though he hasn't panned out to be that kind of a player, he's got the athleticism and he's got the experience where I'd love to have him back as a backup, but not at $3.5 million, which is what I had to pay him last year. If I can get him at $2 million, $2.5 million, I'd love to have him back. No, I don't think I can do that. I think somebody out there is going to offer him $3, $4 million, and I'm not going to keep him at that level. But I'd love to have Eric Flowers back. Martin, haven't seen enough out of him yet. He's only $750,000. He'll be staying. Right here, Chase Roulier at center. Boy, I'm really happy to have Roulier at center. This is one of those guys that's easy to overlook. I've got him graded as a guy who's a very solid starter at center. Is he lighting the world on fire? He's not. Is he threatening the all-pro roster? Certainly not. But this is a guy who's holding down a starting spot. And he's not a weakness on the team. And that's valuable. And at $770,000, I am counting in my freaking blessings that I have this guy on the team at this price. I am not worried about him being my starting center at all. I'm glad to have him. He's staying. Tony Bergstrom going to be a free agent. Only $735,000 had to pay him last year, but he's 33 years old. So I don't know if I want him back or not. We'll talk with the coaching staff. I'll talk to my coaching staff very deeply about this. I want to know about his work ethic, his attitude, and I want to know, has he lost a step? Is he worth bringing back as a backup? I suspect he is at $735,000. And with a little bit of veteran experience there, I'd love to have him back. Ross Pierschbacher, I think his name is Ross. We haven't seen enough out of him yet, $660,000. We're going to be bringing him back as well. All right, that's a long video. Some of you hung around a long time to watch that. I appreciate that. This is the Washington Redskins. Things will change. Plans always change. Some guy gets injured that you didn't expect. Somebody gets more playing time and starts looking great that you didn't expect. So there's still almost half a season left to take a look at some of these guys. This is just the offense, and this is just a look at the guys that are on the roster right now. I really haven't talked much about what free agents are going to be available or what draft picks we're going to have and who's going to be available with those particular draft picks that we have. So I haven't talked a lot about how to improve the roster yet, but I have talked about what to do with the players that you've got on the roster here in Washington. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you have a great day. See you next time. Bye.